Hi, this is Dr. A with your anatomy and physiology review of the senses, and in this one we're all going to look at the eye. So the function of the eye is that it contains the sensory receptors for vision, and the structures are the sclera, choroid, retina. These are like layers of the eyeball, and then the eyeball has other components like the cornea and the lens and iris. You also have the conjunctiva, which is like the eyelids, eye muscles. The conjunctiva is like part of the eyelid, sorry. Eye muscles, and then lacrimal apparatus, which is what produces tears. Okay, so here's a diagram. So we have the sclera is the white of the eyeball, is the outermost layer on which the muscles the eye muscles are anchored. And then we have the next layer is the choroid layer, and then it's the retina layer. The retina also contains the optic disc, blood vessels, the macula, the inside where vision happens, the lens here, and then we have the pupil, which is the opening of the iris, and then the iris gives you your eye color, and then we have the cornea here, and we have ciliary muscles right here that suspend the lens. So anyway, that's a quick little overview of the anatomy of the eye. So ophthalmology is the study of the eye. The eyeball is the organ of sight, and the eyeball transmits an external image to the brain via the optic nerve, and then the brain translates that sensory impulse, that image, from the optic nerve, that sensory impulse from the optic nerve into an image. Each eyeball is housed in the orbit. The orbit is a bony opening in the skull that helps protect the eye. The eyeball itself consists of three layers: the sclera, the choroid, and the retina. And then light enters the eye through the anterior structures of the sclera, so where the lens and cornea, etc. And then it is focused on the sensory receptors cells of the retina. These cells convert the light into an electric signal that can then travel via the optic nerve. So the sclera, or the outermost layer of the eyeball, it's the white layer. It provides a tough protective coating for the inner structures of the eye. The sclera is also called the white of the eye, and the anterior portion of the sclera is a cornea, and it's clear. It's clear and transparent, and it refracts light rays, so it bends light rays as they pass through it and enter the eye. And it bends the light rays so it can focus it on the area of the retina that is responsible for vision. The choroid is the opaque middle layer of the eyeball. It distributes the blood supply for the eye, and then the anterior part of the choroid layer consists of three structures: the iris, which is the colored portion of the eye; the pupil, which is the opening in the center of the iris, and it's usually seen as being black; and then the ciliary body, which is a ring of smooth muscles that is behind the iris and that holds on to the lens. The lens is not part of the choroid layer. The suspensory ligaments connect the lens to the ciliary body, and then the ciliary body was part of the choroid layer. When the ciliary body contracts or relaxes, the suspensory ligaments that will pull on the edge of the lens, and this will change the shape of the lens and will focus light onto the retina. The retina then is the innermost layer of the eyeball, and it contains two types of sensory receptor cells that detect light rays. We have rods and cones. So rods are active in dim light and help the eye see gray tones. So it's kind of like black and white vision, if you will. And then cones are active in bright light and are responsible for color vision. Light that passes through the lens will strike the macula lutea, or yellow spot. And the center of the macula lutea contains a depression called the fovea centralis. And the fovea centralis contains many cones. It is a point of clearest vision. The optic disc is the point where the optic nerve leaves the eyeball, as well as where retinal blood vessels enter and leave. Because it has no rods and cones, the optic disc causes a blind spot in each eye's field of vision. And the funny thing is, even though there's a blind spot, you're not seeing a little black spot in your field of vision. the brain fills in the information that's missing based on the information that's around it, which is really cool. The interior spaces of the eye contain two types of fluid. We have a watery fluid called aqueous humor. So aqueous humor is for water, water, right? And it fills the spaces between the cornea and the lens, so in the anterior portion of the eyeball. And then there's a semi-solid gel called vitreous humor that fills a large open area between the lens and retina, and it helps hold the retina layer, the innermost layer of the eyeball, in place. So here is a more detailed diagram of the eyeball. So we had the sclera, choroid layer, and retinal layer. Here's the vitreous body right here with the vitreous fluid. And here is the fovea centralis, which is surrounded by macula lutea. This is where the sharpest vision occurs. And then this part here, where the blood vessels enter and leave, and the optic nerve leaves the eyeball, is the blind spot. And so optic disc, also referred to optic disc, but it's the blind spot. And then here's the ciliary body, which are some muscles that are tied to the suspensory ligament, which pull then on the lens and will alter its shape to focus rays of light onto the fovea centralis. And then we have the iris and the pupil, and then we have the cornea, and then in the space here between the cornea and the lens, you have the aqueous humor. So, and then we have our conjunctiva right here, and then we have our eyelids right there, and our eyelashes that are represented there. So here's a photograph of the retina of the eye, and so the optic disc appears yellow, and the retinal arteries radiate out from it. You can see it right here. So there's where the optic disc, that's the blind spot. And then this darker area here in the center of the photo is the macula lutea. So let's talk about the muscles of the eye. So the external eye muscles connect to the eyeball and connect the eyeball to the skull. And they allow for change in the line of sight. So they provide support for the eyeball and the eye sockets. So they allow you to move your eyeballs around to look around. The 6 muscles of the eye include the 4 rectus muscles and the 2 oblique muscles. The rectus muscles pull the eye up, down, left, or right in a straight line, and the oblique muscles will produce diagonal eye movements. Weakness in the external eye muscles can result in strabismus or being cross-eyed. The eyelids, there's a pair of eyelids that cover each eyeball. Eyelids provide protection from foreign particles, trauma, and injury from intense light. Both the upper and lower edges have eyelashes or cilia that protect the eye from foreign particles. And then sebaceous glands in the eyelids secrete lubricating oil onto the eyeball. Then the conjunctiva is a mucous membrane lining, and it forms a continuous covering on the underside of each eyelid across the anterior surface of each eyeball. The conjunctiva provides protection by sealing off the eyeball and the socket. Then the lacrimal apparatus, it consists of several structures. We have the lacrimal gland. It produces tears to wash and lubricate the eye. We have lacrimal canals, which drain tears into the nasolacrimal duct. And then the nasolacrimal duct carries the drainage into the nasal cavity. So that is why when you cry a lot and there's tears that are coming down your face, they'll also make your nose run, because part of those tears are going to be draining into the nasal cavity. And so here are the structures illustrated. So we have the lacrimal sac, the lacrimal canals here, and they lubricate the eyeball, and then here's the nasolacrimal duct that drains into the nasal cavity. Oh, and here's the superior and inferior lacrimal or tear glands right here. How vision works: when light rays reach the eyes, they pass through the cornea, pupil, aqueous humor, lens, and then vitreous humor, and then the rays strike the retina that stimulate the rods and cones. An upside down image is sent to the optic nerve, And then the optic nerve transmits this image to the brain where it is translated into a right side up image. And so here the light rays are going to enter the cornea, and they are going to be refracted, so they're going to be bent a little bit once they hit the cornea. And then they're going to hit the lens here, go through the pupil, hit the lens, and then be bent again where they are going to hit here the fovea centralis to have the sharpest vision of the image. But the image is upside down. So here it is represented. So you know, the light rays will bend here and here, but they're supposed to cross and flip and concentrate the image here on this area. So vision requires the proper functioning of 4 mechanisms to happen. The external eye muscles must be coordinated so that both eyes move together and they focus on the object that you're looking at. The pupil must emit the correct amount of light in, and then the lens must correctly focus that light onto the retina. And if it doesn't, then you may need glasses to correct the bending of that light so that the light can be focused on the retina. And then the optic nerve must transmit the sensory images to the brain. And if there's damage to the optic nerve, then it could prevent the transmission of these images to the brain. So, all right, so that was a quick review of the eye and the mechanisms of vision. Thank you so much.